Alright, I wanted to do a video just talking about my installation process and how I configure and use Blender in my personal life. So I'm going to quote unquote nuke my installation and start over from a completely clean slate and just try to explain this just from the beginning, just so there's no question about how you would set up Blender, how you install Blender, how you get things set up when getting started with these add-ons or any of that. So hopefully this will be a foundational resource. So for the setup for showing how I would set things up, first thing I'm going to do is locate my Blender folder because I'm a long-time user. I actually have a internal Blender repo on the computer. So I'm actually going to rename my Blender to be Blender A. And then that means that everything I do from here on will be on a clean slate. The other thing is I will go to my desktop and, I usually keep a bunch of builds of Blender. I'm just going to delete that along with the Blender version manager itself. And it's no biggie. We'll just, clear those out real quick. And this is just me starting from a vanilla setup of I'm new to Blender. How do I start? So just to ensure that everything I'm showing is just from the same place that you would be. So, nothing set up in advance. I mean, this removal process is taking a bit, but you know what, we'll just skip on that. But we ended up removing all the versions. Let's try that again. And I see this actually open down here by the clock. So now we'll go ahead and remove it. So now it's actually completely gone. So there's no Blender version manager. There's none of that. So you could either download the latest version from blender.org, which is one of my favorite ways to download things. And for some reason it'll give you an MSI, which is a little weird. I'm going to press backspace on that page. And let's actually look for the other versions. And we probably actually want the portable zip, in all honesty. Me personally, on my desktop, I have a folder for called Blender. And I usually create a folder called Blender Builds. And so there we are, we have our Blender build. So, I could just download this and, once again, we download the MSI by mistake. So, they really want to put that MSI on you. And so we begin downloading it. I'll go ahead and bring up my downloads and we see that we're actually downloading it twice over here. But we'll just take a moment and, maybe even clear our downloads while we're waiting on this, Nothing to hide, but still, long download list, and I'm never recalling it too often. But while we're waiting on that, I'll just go ahead and download the Blender version manager because, we see that there's a Windows version and a Linux version. I'm not a Linux person, so I would have to rely on a Linux user to actually make some content for that. So, you can see I've actually downloaded this thing 3 times because I just love keeping it up to date. And, we'll double click it and let WinRAR pop up. Here we are. And we're just going to drag Blender version manager here. And keep in mind, I'm doing this while I'm still downloading that. So we'll just double click this and it'll open up. And, the first thing is it won't have a directory to point at. In fact, mine is actually pointing at desktop/Blender, which means it will install Blender in this directory itself. And I don't want that. So instead, I will choose this icon here. I believe there's a tooltip that'll show. Okay, it opens the root folder. We actually want to change the root folder. Always reach your tooltips. And we'll click on Blender Builds and just select folder. And now we can begin the installation. And so while we're waiting on that to install, it's actually downloading the same version that I'm probably downloading here. But once that one finishes, I'm going to actually put the contents of this directory also here, where I just manage my Blender builds. And usually I don't know, I guess I'm a weirdo. Maybe I want to keep them across computers or something, but I never do. So we'll just go ahead and extract Blender and let Blender version manager do its thing. It'll just have a version of Blender. And this is like my default way to open Blender because I can see if there's a new version. And then I just use this to keep up with the latest. So right now 2.83 is the current BuildBot latest according to this thing, so that's the one that I'm using. 2.9 is a little flighty right now and has been changing quite a bit. So while we initially worked on compatibility for it, it seems to be having some issues. So here we have 2.82a and 2.83. So let's go in here and just boot up Blender for the first time. So because I renamed that folder at the very beginning, Blender has no idea who I am and what I'm doing here. So of course I want to tell it left click, search, hit next, and we'll go under our preferences and just begin tweaking things. So I always like playing with the themes. However, in this version there's only 2 themes. So we'll just leave that what it is. I do like going under 3D view and just changing the active tool color, which is right here under active object, and I'll just make it blue or something unusual. I don't know. It just eases my eyes. I've been looking at these themes and things so long that I just always go in and make changes to make it feel new. Like right now I'm rocking a Moto theme, which I'll show in a moment. But for the most part, we're just going through and just looking at our settings. I'm not a big fan of auto perspective. If I'm working in ortho, I want to stay in ortho when I use my middle mouse button, so I always turn it off. I consider it the devil. Just a small joke there. And of course, CUDA, we want to use the max power of RTX and my CPU, I guess, even though I'm not messing with cycles. And as far as autosave goes, I always do an autosave, but I want to show like 30 recent files. And that's really it. I don't like the save prompt. Sometimes I just want to exit Blender and it just closes, but I don't know. Save prompt's kind of growing on me. I don't know. We'll just let it hang out, And that's really it. Now we can get to the installation process. So I actually have both of the latest versions downloaded and, hops 24. And we'll just click install from file. And, there's a little bit of a wait. Hops is pretty massive, but we try to keep it small, but it's also massive. So we'll also choose install again, and I'll choose to install box cutter, and now box cutter is installed. And with both of them enabled, we're pretty much good to go. However, I do got to talk about loop tools. And loop tools is what our circle's powered by, so you definitely want to have that enabled. In fact, as I go down the add-on list, you probably want to enable Node Wrangler. You probably want to enable images as planes. Some of those classics. I love images as planes, even if I'm taking that material and using it on something else that's pulsing. But I always scroll down the list a little bit and just look through just to make sure there's nothing else that we're just lacking as far as our setup is concerned. And I usually keep my installs pretty minor. Sometimes new users want to enable all the add-ons ever, in which case we do want to enable probably Edit Mesh Tools. I love Edit Mesh Tools. It shows up in your right click when you're in edit mode. Just try it out sometime. And then Curve Tools. Curve Tools is just great. And if I could take a moment to diverge, we'll just select everything in the scene, delete it, and Shift A, add a curved circle. So if you ever wanted to make a circle into something not a circle very quick, you can press V and turn it to vector. And Curve Tool actually solves the lifelong question of how do you fill it a damn curve? And this is something I've dealt with meshes, and I've made meshes convert to curve and did all sorts of stuff. But really at the end of the day, that's the best way to fill it. So if you're a curve filling in type of guy, I just want to let you know that that's how you solve that problem. So we'll go ahead and make a new scene. And always with my new scenes, first of all, the lamp that's up above, I don't know, it drives me crazy. So we'll just remove it. I'll press Shift H in order to hide everything that's not my selection. And we'll look at this thing from the front, just really look this cube in the eye, because I want to set up Blender to be able to decimate it in the future. So we'll go ahead and launch Box Cutter. And then we can see that we have the latest version of HardOps via the tooltip icon. And we'll minimize Blender down because I don't run Blender at the size of this humongous oversized screen. I'd be turning my head left and right all day. But usually I'll set up Blender how I like, just like this. And I'll even hit it with Control Spacebar to maximize the view. And then we can just go to defaults and just save startup file. And so now that you saved your startup file, that means that if I were to exit Blender and open it again, it'll open up in that configuration. But because of the way that my monitors are, I actually have a monitor above this monitor that's the exact same size as the one that you're probably hating. But whenever I open up Blender, it loads up, you know, looking pretty nice and pretty much set up for me to just click and drag and just go to Box City with the quickness without any further delay. And then you can just kind of trial and error your way to success. You know, you get too stuck, you just control N, make a new file, you get in, you start again. And, you know, that's really how you get in and just get used to hops. Another thing that I want to talk about as far as your startup scene is something called EVHQ, which will optimize your settings for Eevee to just look a little bit better, but it also will give you like this surface shading by setting up your ridge and valleys and screen space and cavity and shadow and all that to just get a better looking view. So to really get Blender to be a good starting plate for me personally, I would set it to EVHQ. And then for me, because my monitors are all weird, I'm gonna have to lower the window like a dunce until I can't see anything anymore, and then save my startup file. And then, you know, when I close this without saving, once I load it, there's a good chance that it's going to load up on the right monitor. I mean, don't ask me how Blender works. I just have to figure out how to make it work for, you know, making it through today. So, you know, seeing the shape so harsh colored is kind of crazy. So having it set to wire mode is also pretty nice for a good starting setup. So let's Control N and let's look at our setup. So that's what we have. We'll just Control N and, you know, let's just lower our window down again. You know, sorry to have to be showing how I have to hack my way through Blender to survive, but if we close it now and we open it up again, Blender should basically be in box cutter mode, box time. Okay, we're going to need to go under display, hit wires only, and then underneath preferences, save our preferences because those behaviors are connected to preferences. And so saving those defaults is a matter of us saving the preferences. And to put that theory to the test, I'm just closing and reopening Blender. Like one of the things I love about Blender is you can just reopen it over and over. Like I will, for some reason I can't now, but I used to middle mouse click the version that's on the taskbar and then open a second iteration. I guess now I have to right click to do it. But I will just open blenders and just keep working shapes over and over and eventually, you know, start playing with mirror it over, you know, probably hit it with a dice, you know, change the algorithm with Q, press T to twist it after I dice, and then just start rolling them dice, you know, and just playing with different results. But, you know, underneath my blender is usually another blender. I mean, I always make that joke, but there always is because Blender opens so fast, so rapidly, you could just stack blenders up. So now let's talk about 2.83 and setting that up. So I know what you're thinking. God, this guy's about to set up Blender again. Yeah, why not? You know, people always talk about me nuking prefs. They're like, man, this guy, you know, has us nuking his nuking prefs and support issues. Now, because I'm a developer, I actually like setting up the prefs to have the tooltips and the extras, so that way I see the Python tooltips. I just love reading tooltips. I don't know. Call me a weirdo if you want. So under themes, inside of the 2.83 version, there's all sorts of themes. So we could look through them like so, but I like to hold control and just scroll. I guess Blender's making a fool out of me today. I can't do that, but we'll change it over to Moto. And this is the default Moto theme that I've been rocking lately. I mean, I always hate changing my theme because every time I change my theme, people ask me a million questions about that theme. And I always use Blender default themes because I don't want any nonsense. And I was actually changing the wrong color. So, you know, this time I'm going to rock a lime green. You know, it really doesn't matter what color you give your selection. Just make sure you know what your selection is, all I'm saying, you know. But I've just been rocking louder colors just to really spice up the old viewport, right? So because I'm on a really good computer now, I can up my viewport anti-aliasing. You know, if I don't like those little sticks, we can change it to like something else, like simple axis. And I think these options are also in the other Blender. But I'm just going over it again just to be remedial with you guys. So under lights, if I wanted to install all my HDRIs that I actually have them set up, and I could go through that installation process too. So let's just do that real quick. So I'm assuming they're on the E drive and they're probably under HDRI, and they're not. So I'll need to find them real quick. Alright, so basically in another video I talk about how I have a collection of HDRs that I made especially for Blender by batch compressing them in Affinity Photo. And so I'll take a moment to install them. I tried to compress them in a way where they weren't over a certain file size, but it did become apparent that if you import HDRs that are like 100 megabytes and you put a ton of them, it will just overwhelm Blender. So I'm just letting you know to maybe not do that. Instead, maybe look into compressing them or bringing in only your favorites. But for me, I love all my HDRs. So we'll talk about that as well and install them in this particular video. So continuing on with the installation, we haven't even gotten around to installing the add-on yet, but we're just going through and just enabling settings. You know, I want to show up to 30 recent files, maybe save a file a minute in just in case it's really crashy. Save prompt, you know, like I said, save prompt's growing on me. We'll let it live. Under save and load, we want to make sure auto run Python scripts is on to avoid any errors that you may get with driver related tools that we have like auto camera and such. For spacebar, I'm part of the left click gang now, and also we spacebar to search up in Blender. So auto perspective is still the devil. It hasn't grown on me at all, so I still turn it off. Emulate 3-button mouse will actually make it where you can't use alt functions on certain things. Like for example, in hard ops, you can alt click sharpen to add a weighted normal mod. But if you turn on emulate 3-button mouse, it makes it more appropriate for a laptop, but it also takes away that functionality. So just a note in case you're thinking about such things. So an interesting thing about Windows, if you press Windows and V, you can recall your clipboard. And so I'm going to recall my clipboard from before to make my clipboard have the contents I had before. And so when we go to install, we can just go directly to where we have the add-ons at and just install the add-ons. And of course, once you click install, you wait a moment, then it will pop up. And then you choose enable. And then we do the same thing again with box cutter. And now that they're both enabled, this time instead of messing around with wire stuff, we're just going to go under the display settings and locate where it talks about wire, which is right here, wires only. But also we may want to try out the new auto wire, which is something that you can actually opt into. So, you know, maybe you want to show wire, and we'll go ahead and just save these preferences. And what this means is that when you start drawing with box cutter, first you have to actually boot box cutter by choosing the active tool icon. But once you actually start box cutter, you can see that now every time I draw a cut, you can see the wireframe. So this was something we were experimenting with, and it's actually pretty cool until you find yourself limiting your choices based on the wires that you're seeing, which is why we actually have it off by default. You can also see the 3D viewport looks pretty generic, which is why HardOps has the Alt-V EVHQ to really just spruce things up. So let's now set up our default configuration for things. And even though we set up Blender twice, you know, we basically set it up for 2.82, which has its own limitations, but we also set it up for 2.83. In the event that we wanted to move to 2.9, I would actually just copy the directory over of your settings, which I'll go over afterwards. So we'll just minimize the window a little bit. You know me, I love having itty bitty windows. And we'll start box cutter. And let's just get rid of this light. This light always comes back to haunt me. And we'll shift H to hide the camera. Maybe start it off in orthographic view. We'll press Alt V, go to EVHQ, get some good shading going. And this is a pretty good starting place. I'll press Control Space to really maximize that view. And like I said, because of my 2-monitor setup, I actually have to lower the window and really save startup file from the basement. But let's say I was getting on my computer and I was like, all right, it's blend time. Well, I'm just going to get in the Blender version manager, just pop that baby up. And I'll reboot the computer, and that is it. And every time a new version of Blender comes up, my settings and my add-ons are already there. So the next thing we can talk about is actually updating and the updating process. So I'll pop up a folder where I actually have the HardOps version installed or downloaded. And let's say that we wanted to update this. Let's say that this was actually the next version and we wanted to update things. Well, on Windows, an easy way to update things is to press Windows and R and just go to the run window. And by using this command that I commonly use, I'm able to jump to the local area, the local data Blender location of my computer. And this is actually where your add-ons and data and basically your identity's kept. Like for example, in 2.83, I installed, the studio lights, which you can see me accessing under the studio lights, and I'm able to just scroll through them because I installed those to the Blender installation itself locally to the computer. Installing add-ons to the specific installation of a Blender location isn't recommended. This is probably the best way to do things. But if we go under 2.83 and we go under scripts and we go under add-ons, you can see that Hard Ops and Box Cutter is here. So when it comes to updating these tools, really it's a matter of just deleting the folder and locating the update. We'll just open it up as a zip, and we just place the folder in the location, basically replacing it like open heart surgery. And the next time we open Blender, it will be on the new version. You don't have to go in prefs, you don't have to enable anything. And we've actually went through great care to make sure that whenever you are using Hard Ops and hovering over things and seeing the tooltips, that you're able to see exactly what version that you're on. So we know that this is 985.24, which to us is _24, which is Service Pack 24 of the Hard Ops 9 Neodymium X release. So if you were ever experiencing a support issue and we were saying, what version do you have? You could always just, get yourself a screenshot of this. I actually am a big fan of Share X, so I can just take screenshots like so. And once it shows it here, it's on my clipboard. But there's also, I think Windows Shift and S, which will darken the screen like a Mortal Kombat fatality, and also let you get a snapshot of what's going on. So if you run into an issue where you can't install it, it's just good to just give us a snapshot of what's going on with your problem so we can more accurately diagnose things, because English can sometimes be vague and hard to understand. So, by giving us details, it lets us know exactly what's going on. But for the most part, that covers the basic installation of Hard Ops in a nutshell. So I'll take a brief second. And now we will take a moment to talk about Mira Tools. I'm a particularly big fan of Mira Tools due to its functionality with Curve Stretch. Curve Stretch is just something I cannot live without, and we basically built a handler for it on the hop side to just make it a little bit more accessible for workflow. But the installation of it can be a little bit questionable. Even down to locating which one is the correct one to click, which I'm just going to go with the one with the highest number of clicks, which will load us up into another window, and we can just, isolate this. And, for this, we will just choose to download the zip from the corner of the repo. And, viewing downloads for me is just Control-J. But let's open up this particular add-on. Call me a diehard. I just love WinRAR. I'm a weirdo. But if you were to take this folder and place it in your add-ons, nothing is going to work. For some reason, the way that this tool's made is you go inside of Blender and you locate under add-ons for 2.8 Mira Tools, which is the version that we want. If you're crazy, you can install them all. There's a lot to Mira that's worth checking into. But let's say we wanted to just install this add-on we saw and we liked real quick. Well, I would press Windows and R, and inside the run window, we can just bring up the location of our Blender install. And we'll go inside of 2.83, scripts, add-ons, and let's actually bring in Mira Tools. So right now, Mira Tools isn't installed because I didn't close and reopen Blender, nor did I go in my prefs and enable it. So if we take a look at our key map, we'll see that our key map doesn't actually show Mira Tools being listed here. So if we were to say close and reopen Blender and enable this tool, we could then begin using it. But really, you don't even have to close and reopen Blender if you're on top of things. In the 3D view, we'll just press F4 and we'll go under Preferences. And I'm just going to hit the refresh button a couple of times and just search for Mira. And, I just hit the refresh like shaking some dice, and then now we have Mira Tools installed. And so if we search for 9, we are back under the hard op settings, and under the key map we don't see the mirror entry. So this is actually one of the reasons why we would want to enable this tool and then reopen Blender. So we go ahead and do that. And I could just tell you from repeated installations over the years and showing this process that it's definitely there. And it was there last time, it just wasn't showing in the key map. But now we have Control-Shift-Tilde curve support. So one of the things people always want to do when they first get into hops is, play with some stretchiness. So, we'll take this cube in edit mode and just scale it out, pressing S, X, and just scaling it out. And we'll put a couple of loop cuts, and we'll just alt-click this edge to just get the whole selection. Pressing Control-Shift-Tilde, we can just quickly remap this. So to let users know, like who aren't using tildes on keyboards, we do have the key map there for a reason, for remapping things. You can't remap the tilde and remap the tilde everywhere. We can't remap a remapper for a remap. That would make no sense. But you can remap the Control-Shift-Tilde to be the Control-Shift hotkey of your choice if you're in a country or you're just not able to access the tilde very easily. But this is one of my favorite ways to just kind of create some freeform shapes just on the fly when getting in here and playing with hard ops and just getting things installed. So, I mean, this video ended the moment that your need was fulfilled with this video. I apologize for it being of such an extended length. But, I wanted to be very thorough in covering the installation. So let's say that you were also, a super fan, right? Like you were trying to get all the tools. So let's bring up Bezier Mesh Shaper. So to demonstrate this portion of the video, I actually bought Bezier Mesh Shaper just one more time. And we'll go ahead and tweet out, how much we love that tool. And I'll click to view the product so we can view the product here. And so now we have Bezier Mesh Shaper. In fact, my example is actually kind of ruined a little bit. Let me see if I could bring it up in the form of the product page. All right, there we go. I apologize for the mistake there. So normally whenever you log into Blendermarket, you're able to go under your name and orders and view your previous orders. So I've actually bought quite a few products on Blendermarket because I'm a big fan of its structure. However, I'm also a big fan of Gumroad. So if we go to our downloads, we can just download the latest update of this, which I'm guessing is going to be this one for 2.80. Sometimes it can get confusing. We'll just save that file. Alternatively, when it comes to Gumroad, if you were logged into your account and you accessed a sales page, you can just log in and of course rate a product 5 stars if you love it. And we can just go under download and just choose to download the version. So we'll just download the latest version. And as you may have guessed, I'm downloading it twice. But let's say that I wanted to go ahead and install it. So we will double click the RAR to bring that up. And let's say we want to install this one. I'll press Windows and R and we'll go to the same location. I could probably put some more information in front about scripts and add-ons to take me directly here. But this one's a single PY file and we just drag it in that folder. And so the next time I open Blender, I'm already set up to just cut, ready to go to Box City. But now I'm also able to use Bezier Mesh Shaper in addition to Mira Tools. And a lot of people ask why I use each of the tools. Like, the Mira Tools is a different type of beast in itself. Like I use this thing on so much hard surface shaping work, and just being a modeling lover in general, this thing is just insane. It consolidates an entire slew of vertices to a number of points you can just quickly move, and that just helps my brain. However, Bezier Mesh Shaper is another type of beast. I can select this whole range of points and then press Q and go under plugin. Okay, so my antivirus or whatever this is thinks Blender's a virus. Please, it's time to uninstall it. When your antivirus thinks Blender's a threat, it's time to uninstall it, just saying. I'll be talking with it afterwards. So we'll go under plugin, and we don't actually have it listed just yet, which is probably because we didn't go through and enable the add-on. So silly me, let's go ahead and enable it. And we will go under plugin, and now we have Bezier Mesh Shaper. And Bezier Mesh Shaper is real interesting. Like whenever you start using it, it's not really a lot of interesting, right? Like you're like, what is this doing? Man, it's kind of weird, right? Like, man, this is, I don't know about this tool. But when you get in and you press W and you start playing with the proportional size, you see that you have a level of control with this tool that just is, I don't know, it's just insane to me. I don't know. I have an obsession with curve deforming things. So in a video introducing you guys to hops, I definitely want to introduce you to concepts that are not entirely related to boxes, because while I love the topological constraints of a box and the form factor of making something sexy in the shape of a box, my personal work definitely involves me making things that are very much not box shaped. So, you know, just being able to quickly get in, make shapes like this, and then sharpen it, and then promote it to a bevel is just, that's just how we roll around here. But I hope this video was informative to helping you set up your Blender installation. So, you know, in closing, since we have two different versions of Blender installed, we could actually switch back to that one in the slew of windows here. One of these is our window. We'll go to our desktop, Blender builds, and we'll just, you know, open 2.82 for old time's sake. You know, this old baby, you know, still love it, you know, dark and everything. You know, Blender would have, I was about to say something terrible that I would have to omit in the final version. But, you know, we can go here and actually right click and choose to pin this to the taskbar, basically keeping this version of Blender forever. But me personally, I'm such a fan of the version manager that I always go into version manager in order to open the latest version of Blender. So hopefully that was useful in assisting you with my setup process and how I go about setting up things, as well as showing you how to be more acquainted with your user file locations on the computer and how to remove them if need be, or port them to another computer or any of that stuff. Because really, at the end of the day, your Blender identity is tied to your app data location. And this same thing exists on Mac, and I'm not sure about Linux, but probably does. I'm not going to make any assumptions here, look like an idiot, but this location is something that you can share across your computers, and it is you. So now that I am done with this particular demonstration, I'm just going to close all these blenders. We're just going to forget about all of this, and I'm going to delete this folder. Maybe it'll make a fool out of me. And we'll take my original folder that I renamed at the very beginning, and we'll just rename it back. And now I'm in my, you know, classic version of Blender, the one that I know and love, that I configure, that, you know, I just work in day to day. You know, Blender will take a moment to load, but, you know, I don't want to lose those decal machine paths, and I don't want to lose those kit ops paths, and I don't want to lose my specific box cutter configuration. But now, and also, I love the size of my logo. So hopefully this has been assistive in helping you set up hard ops and just get it configured for your computer. In case you're wondering how I got the logo the way that it looks, just to show that real fast, is we could just go under File and just load factory defaults. And once we go under Preferences and enable hard ops and box cutter, under hard ops and color, there's this really obscure option for logo, which is from back in the day whenever we used to use a logo on the viewport to indicate. So the first thing I'll do is scale it up, which you can see it's scaling in the back here because it's not in the right location. But if we adjust the X and Y, we can actually get this thing positioned just right. And right now I actually feel it's a little bit of work to get the logo positioned just right and scale it. So I definitely want to make some sort of modal operator to do this in the future, so that way users can get their logo as big as they want and as nice as they want and exactly where they want at the drop of a dime. But once you have that set up, of course, save your preferences. I'm not going to save these preferences. That would be suicide. But that is how you get your big logo inside of Hop. So, you know, the logo is useful for indicating when you're inside of Box Cutter and what state that you're in. You know, just kind of a thing I just put just to help beginners who are watching my content. So it's not really a mandatory thing, but it is kind of an Easter egg if you want to just get in and play with things. And so, you know, Box Cutter is a journey of exploration where basically you can start off reading the tooltips that we worked on so hard last release. And, you know, one of the fun things to do is just do a couple of box cuts and then draw a box around it, press Y and extract it, and just cut it everywhere. and just have fun with extractions. You know, extractions is still relatively new to things, but you can always switch your cutter back to box and just extract all your extractions and just keep playing with extractions all day. And you can see in this basic setup that my shading just looks terrible. It's so hard to read things. So that's where Alt V and EVHQ comes from. So with that, we can wrap up this installation video. I hope it was assistive. I apologize for it going on so long, but with that, we'll wrap up this video and I'll see you guys next time.